Welcome to our show. This podcast is devoted to the history, installation, and best practices of fluid-applied reinforced roofing. I'm your host, Chris Ford, and this is 50 years of commercial roof restorations. Okay, so Tim, I want to focus on the containers. Western Colloid has a wide array of options: 5-gallon buckets, 55-gallon drums, 275-gallon totes, or up to 5,000 gallons in a tanker. Let's focus on tankers first. So, what are the pros and cons working on a tanker?
Well, the pros for a tanker are you have, like you said, up to 5,000 gallons of emulsion that I hook up to one time and I go spray. I don't have labor messing around with changing drums or totes. So by far the most productive way to get your emulsion, if your job is big enough, is a tanker. And as long as your job site allows you to get a tanker into it, it's always going to be your choice, a tanker.
Obviously access, you have to have a place to park it, and the roof needs to warrant 5,000 gallons, so you have to have a big enough building that you need that much product. So otherwise, you buy it in the quantities that make sense for your job.
Right, and we do have the ability to, you don't have to put 5,000 gallons, but by the same token, we're not putting 600.
Is there any special equipment that you would recommend when working out of a tanker?
Yeah, for sure you want to use a filter. We use a 3-inch Y strainer. So one of the cons, I guess, if you want to call it that, is over time with a tanker you can get some buildup on the sides of the tank, and then that can fall off, and so you could get some clumps. They might get down into your valve, and then that's going to come through. And a filter will prevent that from getting into your pump. So that filter is really important in that aspect of protecting your pump from getting that thicker emulsion into it. And it could gum it up a little bit, and you'd have to take some downtime and clean it up. So Those filters are really your best friend for a tanker.
So I know that tankers are more efficient. I know we never kept a guy on the ground when we were working out of a tanker. You set up in the morning, and all of your labor force goes up on the roof. They work until break. Sometimes even break on the roof, depending. But at that point, maybe you're going to shut your pump down then. But you don't have to leave a guy on the ground babysitting. On a 5-man crew, you're talking about 20% of your labor doing virtually nothing. So the tank gets you that back.
Unfortunately, in some of the other containers, you got to have somebody on the ground. It's just part of what you got to do.
Especially drums. There's nothing you can do.
Drum is a full-time man on the ground.
Yeah, 100%.
Totes are, I consider it a part-time man on the ground. There's enough time for a guy to go back up on the roof and
work for an hour.
Yeah, probably a little less than an hour, but you'll get that feel when you're using it, how long it takes you to blow through a tote.
Yeah.
And then you just know, okay, hey, it's been 35 minutes. I'm going to send my guy down now so that he can tilt the tote. Again, depends on your job access. Do you have the ability to pull a semi into that facility and drop a tanker? Will that business let that tanker sit there for maybe a week? Because we like to see you kind of get through a tanker in about 7 days.
And that's an important point too. So understand the tanker is the most efficient. It gives you access to the most product. You're not going to have any downtime while you're moving stingers or moving transfer hoses. You're not going to be concerned with getting the last 40 gallons out of your tote, which requires some tipping and things like that. Yeah. Gives you basically an endless flow of product for the most part, but it's not without it's downsized. We want you to get through that. It's a lot of product, and I know you got the filter on there and everything, but please, if you are ordering tankers, plan to use them as soon as they show up, or the following morning at worst, right? So don't order a tanker and then start your prep work and have skylights to replace and things like that. Let's work together to try and keep the product in the best, most usable condition. And by having that tank delivered, communication with us will go a long ways. Let us get it to you right when you need it, and that way you have the best possible product throughout.
Yeah, for sure. It's teamwork. We'll work with you, you work with us.
Oh, so let's go into totes. I know in my travels, a lot of the contractors are familiar with working out of totes. A lot of products come in totes. What's some of the pros and cons working out of totes? Where would you use those?
Totes are going to be used in areas where it's not cost effective to get you a tank. So it would cost too much money to deliver you a tank versus delivering you totes. Because with totes, it's a one-way charge. With a tank, we got to bring you the tank, we got to bring the tank back.
Yeah.
So it's all a cost analysis that you got to run through. Get a quote on what cost is for a tank versus totes. Unfortunately, in today's world with increases in trucking, for a lot of areas around the country, it's going to be totes.
Yeah.
We're just not going to be able to be cost effective and get you a tank.
Gas is expensive. Drivers are expensive.
Yeah. That's the bottom line. So totes are fine. It's 275 gallons. That gives you quite a bit of product to work with. And that's where I say a tote is a part-time guy on the ground in my book. Certain companies, they just like a guy on the ground, and that's fine. I mean, that's for you to decide and you to determine as a company. But you have the ability to have a guy on the roof working, and then you get your timing down, where you say, okay, we're blowing through a tote every 45 minutes. So I would say at 35 minutes, you want your guy on the ground, because you want to have him down there so that when the tote gets lower, he's going to want to take and tilt that tote up, put something under it to support it, to just get that emulsion to slide towards the valve and get as much of it out as you can. It's to your benefit to use up all the product. What I'll teach some guys is I tell them to take like I believe it's a 6-inch hole on the top of that tote. Mm-hmm. And so I just tell them, take a broom handle and put a 4-inch chip brush on there. And while the guy's on the ground anyways, he can just help drag some of that emulsion down towards the valve and get as much of it out. He's not doing anything else.
So that actually brings up something just entered in my head. So getting the product out is important, obviously, because you paid for it. You want to use every drop. And if you don't get it out while the transfer hose is hooked up, if you don't suck it out of the same hole that all the rest came out, it's a real pain in the butt to try and get it later.
Yeah.
So the other thing, getting that product out, because part of the deal with totes is the disposal. What are you going to do with the tote when it's done? So do you have any recommendations on, what are some of the options? What have you done in the past?
So for me, there's 2 bars across the top. Take a couple bolts off. You can pull what they call the bladder. That's the plastic part that actually holds the emulsion. I take that out. I take a Sawzall. I cut it in half. I expose it to the sunlight. I need to let that completely cure out. And then I take those 2 pieces, the bladder, and I stack them together. And I keep doing that. And then I need to dispose of them, however it is. For me, if I was working out of town, I ordered a container, a trash container, 40-yard.
Yeah.
And you just throw them away. But you gotta let the material dry. So, again, that's something that as the job's starting to go and you're going through some totes, that guy on the ground can be starting some of that process. And so it's not wasted time of him on the ground.
Yeah,
Be doing
and then it's going to take a little time for that to dry. But that's where it's really important that you got the product out. If you had 50 gallons left in the bottom of that tote, because you never took the time to tip it, man, it's going to take a while for that, or you got to scoop it out of there somehow. Yeah. So really important, try and get the totes as empty as possible.
Well, and that's where the little brush, you can get creative. I mean, you spent money on it, you'll figure a way to get it out. I mean, we'll help you a little bit, but you got to do it. You got to try your best.
I want to drums. Okay, so a lot of guys are familiar with drums from other products. Fluid applied companies have worked with a wide array of products. Drums are a common container that things come in. I know you and I prefer drums the least.
Yes.
It's just constant. Every time you pick that stinger up, you're putting air in the line, and our emulsion goes down at 6 gallons per square. The pump pumps at 15 to 17 gallons per minute. So, on a warehouse, if I'm pumping out 15 gallons a minute,
that 50 gallons doesn't last too long.
50 gallons doesn't last long. But occasionally they do drums. Anything to think about with working with drums?
Just making sure that that is a full-time guy on the ground, and it's all about getting your typically you would have those drums on pallets, and so it's getting your setup set up right so that you can pump all 4 of those drums and maybe 4 more, all from the same location with the pump. So I got 2 pallets, 8 drums. I'm going to put the pump right in the middle, hit these 4. Those 4 are done. I'm going to hit these 4. Well, now I've got to actually move the pump and get set up for another 8, 4 and 4. So it's kind of setup, location, and putting your product spread out so it best suits your need.
And I know once those drums are empty, I mean, one man can comfortably lift a drum, and he can kind of be dumping the last couple gallons into the next container.
Yeah, and that's what you're going to do is, you just kind of lift it up and dump it into the next one, get as much of it out of there as you can. Again, you got the same issue. You got to dispose of the drums at the end. It's the same thing. Let them dry. And then you can throw them away. I don't think you can recycle them. There might be, I've heard where some guys have gotten somebody to pick them up, drums and totes, but don't count on it. Not with emulsion having been in it.
Yeah, so I do know in my travels, depending on where you're located, people have used these things. So call around, ask, before you even place the order. Make a couple phone calls and check with scrap yards.
I'll tell you this funny story, Chris. I had all these totes and I just thought, you know what? Maybe somebody wants these things. And we put them out on the side and put a sign up and said free. After a week, nobody had taken anything. So I thought, I wonder. I put a sign up, I said $25. We came back the next day, every tote was gone. Now, I can't say it's going to work today for you, but it was just kind of funny that happened.
Yeah. Hey, I want to circle back. So we've talked about a wide array of things, and one thing that I think is worth covering another time is the safety. Okay, so kind of all-encompassing, Tim. When you're working with these pressurized systems and these pumps, I don't care if you're pulling out from a tank, or a tote or a drum or however you did it. What are some of the key precautionary measures that you would emphasize? If you could say, hey, don't forget this. What are maybe your top 2 or 3? You're like, absolutely do not forget to do this.
Number 1 would be, do not forget to close a valve on a tanker before you disconnect your transfer. That is going to make for a very bad day. You gotta remember to close the valve before you disconnect. You're gonna have a giant mess if you don't. So that would be number 1. Number 2 is, if it is a tanker, cracking that lid.
The venting
of the tank, making sure that you have taken care of that. I'll say the other thing that's really important is making sure that everybody on the crew is aware of these things. It's not just good enough for one guy to know it. Everybody's got to know what the procedures are. You're going to get yourself in trouble because you're going to, that guy is going to be gone doing something and you send another guy, and then that's how mistakes happen. So it's really key that everybody is trained on what you need to do to hook up and disconnect and safety precautions. Making sure you release pressure from your spray hose before you disconnect. You can release it through the bypass hose, opening the wand up on the roof. I recommend you do both. It's just a double protection.
Yep.
So those are kind of the bigger things in my eyes.
Yeah, the pressure, it's a pressurized system. It's a closed system. It's under pressure. And sometimes that pressure is significant. Especially with the acrylic, it can be really high. Maxed out at like 4,000 with that 250 Graco lower end. So yeah, I would say from my perspective, definitely. I say this all the time, and and then after they forget, and either get product on their face or make a mess somewhere, I say it again. Like, always assume all lines are under pressure at all times. Wrap it with the trash bag. That's my trick. Is just kind of wrap everything with the trash bag, loosen it up with your wrenches. And then once that it's loose and you got the hand tight, you know, and then you can remove the trash bag and stuff like that. But just assume every connection that you're about to loosen up is going to be under pressure, and stuff's about to spray out of there, and it can go far.
Well, that's good that you said. So when you're loosening, you got 2 pipe wrenches or a couple crescent wrenches, and you're undoing. You just kind of understand how that swivel works, and as it starts to get loose, you can just move that swivel a little bit, and if it's got pressure, you just move that swivel a little bit, and you'll get. And then you're like, okay, stop. We still got pressure on here. Because if you just sit there and turn your wrenches, and it's too late. That thing's, once it gets to that last little section, it's just going to blow.
Yeah.
And product is going to fly.
Yeah, as soon as that product has an exit point, it's going to take it. And it might be a small exit point. And depending on which way it's pointing, you know, could be at you, could be at the building, could be at a car.
Yep.
You know, that was
Seen them
too
all.
late.
Seen them all.
Yeah.
Seen the person, seen the car, seen the truck, seen the building,
Well,
seen the pedestrian.
yeah, obviously we don't get anyone dirty or any property. Definitely 100% don't want to see anyone get hurt.
No, that's number one for sure, is protect your workers.
So, hey, again, I appreciate the time, Tim. You know, for our listeners, hopefully you learned some stuff here. For more information, you can always visit us at westerncolloid.com. There's good stuff on there. Please subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of content in there and more to come. So, thanks again for listening.
All right, thanks, guys.